Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie Longmire, and I'm a student here at Marian Technical College taking organizational behavior. And so I'm preparing my presentation here on Zoom. So I'm just getting a few things started here. I'm going to be talking a little bit about employee retention. And so as I get my slideshow up and running, I'm going to be speaking to the managers today on what their role is about retaining employees. I pulled this quote from an article titled 42 Worrying Workplace Stress Statistics. And it says, just as work-related stress carries over to our personal lives, so too does stress stemming from our personal life affect our work. 80%, which is a very high number, 80% of US employees spend 12 to 20 hours per month dealing with financial concerns while they're at work. Talk about hitting that productivity line for managers when you're thinking about that. And so it is really important that we learn some of those reasons on why and what can managers do to really help that aspect. Before we get started, I want to identify a couple terms that I will be utilizing during this presentation. And so one of those is socioeconomic status. And the definition from dictionary.com is the position or standing of a person or a group in a society as determined by a combination of social and economic factors that affect access to education and other resources crucial to an individual's upward mobility. Another term that I'm going to use a lot throughout this presentation is called instability. And that definition by dictionary.com is the quality or state of being unstable, lack of stability or firmness, or the tendency to behave in an unpredictable, changeable, or erratic manner. When I'm talking about instability in this presentation, I'm going to refer a lot to the fact that it's daily instability. So we're talking about employees and we're talking about retention. What I'm going to be talking about when it comes to instability is what are some of these things that are changing and that are unpredictable in employees' lives that could cause them to turn over in your organization or in your company. And so I'm going to be referring to that as daily instability. What are some of those things that they struggle with on a daily basis that could hinder their performance, their success at work, even when they show up and things like that. So let's move on to the next slide and let's define and look at what some of those daily instabilities are. So there is a great book called Workplace Stability, and it was written by a lady named Weirich. And so she talks about what daily instability looks like for employees. And so if you're in a business right now where you're seeing a lot of employee turnover, you may actually kind of see some of your employees dealing with a few of these things. And there might be some light bulbs here for you. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about one of those instabilities called agency time. What agency time means is that, in employees or people who don't necessarily make enough to make ends meet, they really need to rely on some of those social services and resources in the community. And so agency time is when an employee or a person would need to go to that agency and fill out paperwork and answer some questions. And maybe it's something for insurance or their children's insurance, or maybe it's food or access to help with rent. And so that stuff takes time. And a lot of people don't understand that those agencies are actually open usually 9 to 5, just like other businesses. And so that actually can lead to absenteeism for an employee. Maybe they had a call off that day. Maybe they had a car repair and they needed to go to Job and Family Services to get some financial help for that. Again, talking a lot back to that statistic we just read about. And so now they need to go to Job and Family Services to get some help financially to be able to meet that car repair. And so this takes a lot of time, and this is a life work balance to make ends meet for a lot of employees. And so that can lead to people who are experiencing this, some instability and some erraticness to their day. And so another one that we should look at is also transportation. Transportation it can be a big issue. So maybe it's just the lack of reliable transportation. Maybe they have a vehicle, but there's just something that seems to be wrong with it all the time, or they blow a tire, or they had to choose this week whether they were going to get more groceries or maybe they were going to put more gas in. So the food won. And so now they're lacking on gas money. Or maybe it's car maintenance. Maybe there's some things that they need to take care of. And so what happens, depending on the problem with transportation, is it can lead to tardiness. An employee can miss that day because they can't afford those car repairs and things like that. And then also just general turnover. And so if the employee feels like this is too hard of a struggle, oftentimes they do just end up leaving the job because they can't meet the demands. That transportation issue is becoming, it's so unstable, they can't continue to get to work. Another thing that managers should really look for when it comes to daily instability with employees is housing. And so, sometimes employees don't talk about these things. And so kind of noticing those signs is extremely, you can be a little more on the proactive side with that. But what housing instability looks like is maybe an inability to pay rent. Again, life throws some curveballs. Now you've got some car maintenance that you have to do. And so you are unable to pay all of your rent. And so now that you're behind and, it just kind of gets into a snowball effect. Or maybe their landlord is not a very good landlord and he's not taking care of the things that he needs to take care of. And so there is some issues in the home. And so your employee may be dealing with issues in their house that you don't know about, and it's really kind of beyond their control. And so some of these things that you'll see on the employee side is some sleep deprivation, and it may affect their productivity. So they're coming in sluggish to work and they really aren't being super productive. Maybe they're really tired or grouchy. There's just something that seems to be irritating. This could really be any of them, but specifically for housing, there's maybe some things that are going on because housing really is supposed to be a safe haven for us, place that we can go home and relax, right? And so this could also lead to absenteeism. So maybe they were getting kicked out of their rental, maybe something happened and the house had to they had to be evicted or something happened with the landlord. And so this could also lead to absenteeism. When that housing is unstable, that can become a huge issue. And so again, managers can kind of look at some of these things. Again, you're kind of seeing some trends here. So instability also could look like unreliable childcare. I know that obviously a lot of parents are in the workforce. A lot of us have kids. And so if we don't have reliable childcare, and in some areas, reliable childcare is very, very difficult to come by. And so if you have a lack of money or there's something going on that you can't, you got called into work and you didn't have a sitter for that particular time frame. Now there's another issue with childcare. And so as a parent myself, that's really hard if you don't have anybody to watch your child. What is your options, And so that does lead to absenteeism as well. And so childcare can be a really daunting thing for employees if they don't have somebody secure that can do that. Or what happens when their sitter ends up sick and then they don't have a backup. So being able to have access to other sitters is really important. So these are all things that employees struggle with. And a lot of them you can see actually has to do with a lack of resources and financial resources, which again comes back to that first quote that so many employees are worried about their financial status and they're thinking about it, and it's affecting their productivity. And then oftentimes it can lead to absenteeism, it could lead to turnover. And so how do you retain those employees? Now that we're looking at all of the things that you could possibly be seeing with your employees, let's take a look at the manager aspect. So as a manager, what can you do? What are the things you should be looking for? And how can you help those employees so that you can ultimately retain them? So from that book called Workplace Stability that was written by Weirich, it says, look for common ground with your employees, whether that is language, common skills, experiences, status, or mental attributes. There are things that we try to find in common when we're building relationships. We find out, what is your job, or what do you like to do, or do you have children, or do you have any pets? Are you a nature lover? We kind of ask people questions, and we do that because it helps us build relationships with people. And so as managers, you can also do that as well. And so find that common ground with your employees. Do you like the same baseball team? Do you cheer for the same football team? What are things that, you can say to them when you're checking in on them? Hey, how's that team doing? And then it builds this trust and this relationship. And so then when things are going on with employees that you're managing, they may be a little more, they feel that you're a little more trustworthy, and that they can maybe share some of these things that they're struggling with. And that is obviously often leading to absenteeism. So let's talk about that manager and employee relationship. So after some research, I looked at this article called The Management and Employee Relationship in the Workplace. And it kind of opened up some opportunities to talk about what those managers could be doing with their employees to help build that relationship. And number one on the list, which is probably no surprise, is communication, but not just any type of communication. It's open communication. And so what does that really mean? Well, clear communication from the manager about expectations and what is important for productivity is important, because if you have an employee who doesn't understand the expectations of the job, they may be doing something that they feel is correct, but you see that it's not correct. And then that obviously can build some tension and some stress. And so once we're clear about the expectations of the job and what they need to do, or maybe it's even about being late, what are the protocols and procedures for calling off appropriately, the time frame that you should call off, or maybe the expectations of the job, what does that look like? And so the more that managers can communicate openly with employees, the more trust is built. And I think you'll see a little bit of a common theme through these tips from the article, and a little bit of it has to do with trust. So the next bullet point on there is set boundaries. And so as a parent, I'm always trying to set boundaries with my kids so that they know what they should do and should not do. And so managers are the same as far as how they set boundaries. So management shouldn't engage in close relationships. So often when we engage in those close relationships, sometimes it can look like there may be some favoritism towards one employee over the other. And that's actually going to build some distrust with your employees. So we want to make sure that we're being consistent because that favoritism and those close relationships with other employees could foster some tension and really build some low morale within your team. And so setting those consistent boundaries and being clear about expectations is really important to, again, build that trust with your employees. The more that you do that, the more the employees will be able to feel confident about coming to you when things are a little unstable at home. And so again, the whole process is, how do we retain those employees? So let's talk a little bit about conflict resolution as well. This is another point that the article brought out, which I find is an interesting one. And it is about addressing disputes in a timely manner. You know, oftentimes managers get busy throughout their day, and so something happens and you kind of make a mental note, I need to go back, I need to address that, I need to write up some notes. But really addressing those disputes in a very timely manner is critical. Again, comes back to the trust building factor. And also it shows that there is those are boundaries and you can't cross the boundaries. And so there should also be formal and informal ways as you are as a manager that you give your employees to express their grievances. And so maybe for those formal ways, that looks like them writing up an email or a letter explaining the situation so that you have that in a very formal way. But people who are in different socioeconomic statuses, so people especially that are dealing with daily instability, those employees are going to look for more of those informal ways. And they are going to want to be able to talk and build that relationship aspect. So their expressive grievances may be a side conversation, or where you need to ask them to move it privately, or be able to make rounds depending on your business and touch base with each one of your employees. And maybe that's when they share something, and that's the informal way that you allow employees. Or maybe it's a one-on-one that you set up with them on a more consistent basis. And so maybe that's when they can also express those grievances. But, you know, letting the employees want managers to, they want to be heard. And so those employees want to be heard. And so if there is something that they are struggling with and they share it with you as a manager, you know, being able to address that in a timely manner is extremely important, again, for that trust building factor. And then this last one, I think is really critical. And the reason why is because, again, if we're looking at employees in the socioeconomic status where they are lacking resources that other employees have, and again, it affects that upward mobility, then fostering growth by their manager is so critically important. Because if they're struggling with daily instability issues, then they need opportunity to grow and to maybe make some more money, to have some different hours. And so it's really important that managers see this type of thing and help them create those career paths that would really be helpful. And so employees without those career paths, or that really don't have an option or feel like they've hit a ceiling or a wall, it can be very motivating for them to know that a manager really wants to foster that growth with them. So if they don't see that there's really a path to getting out of any of their situations, they're going to just feel more unmotivated. And then oftentimes you can see some employee turnover that way as well. So in summary, let's talk a little bit about employees that live with daily instability struggle with absenteeism. So if they have these issues going on, you know, you're going to see some trends, and them employees not showing up to work, and maybe not obviously because they don't want to show up, but because of their socioeconomic status and those barriers that they have. It is causing them so many problems that they are not able to make it to work, or they're late to work, or there's other issues where we have low productivity when they are at work. So managers recognizing that and being able to help them address that is really can be really crucial. And you can retain those employees when you're seeing those things and be open in addressing those things. Managers that build relationships with employees positively affect employee retention. So again, let's just talk a little bit about that trust factor. Employees that know that they can trust their managers and they have that open lines of communication, and those managers are resolving those conflicts when they come up, and they've all set boundaries across the board for each person. And also that those managers also see potential in them and want to guide their career path forward. Those are the managers that are going to get those employees coming back time after time and really are going to have a high retention rate. People in different socioeconomic statuses need assistance to be more productive at work. We talked about that as far as meeting daily, ends meet, that daily instability. Again, these things pop up and they struggle on how to navigate them, or maybe they're the only one working in the household of a family of 5, and it's just tough going sometimes. And so they hit some barriers, and then what happens is they miss work, and then they can possibly be fired. And so there's some things there, which is just going to create some more instability for that person. So how do we continue to keep employees working when they're struggling with these things? And so there are some solutions that businesses can do, and that's for another presentation. But managers, just be on the lookout, be proactive. And that leads me to my last summary point, which is managers recognizing the signs of daily instability can help proactively retain those employees. So if you have an employee that's showing up late or calling off or sharing some things with you, after they've gotten hired, they've missed a day or two, and they're on the verge of losing their job because they're a new employee. If managers can recognize those signs, that they're not, employees don't often just call off work just to call off work. Sometimes there's things going on at home that we just don't know about. So how can we proactively be engaged, build that trust with our employees so that we know exactly how we can help them move forward, keep them in their job so you retain an employee and they can retain their job. So my challenge to each one of you managers today is to learn the goals of 2 employees by the end of the day, personally and professionally. I think you'll be surprised by some of the things that you may hear. And they might just be shocked that you're asking them anyway. But you may hear personally things like, I would succeed my goal if I could secure a childcare sitter through the end of my school year. Or maybe they say, professionally, I actually have goals to be the department head of this particular area. And so by them sharing those things, you might also see that some employees struggle with trying to figure out what their goals are. So I encourage managers not only to find out what those things are from their employees, but I also encourage them to figure out how they can help their employees be able to meet those goals. And I guarantee that if you can work these things into your managerial practices, that you will see retention grow, and you will see your employees happier and more productive. Thank you so much for your time today.